welcome to yet another episode of Cryptid's Corner. And today I want to talk about personality tests and specifically personality tests as they're used for like the hiring process. And I normally do this without notes, but because I want to make sure that I like actually touch on everything that I've been thinking about, I do have like a few notes for this one. But essentially, this is a topic that I never gave much thought to because even though I've done several of these personality tests, like when I'm like job searching, I never actually considered the purpose of them or like why I was taking them. And I never actually sat down and thought about what it means. Like, why are they even having you take a personality test? So I'm sure most people are familiar with the Myers-Briggs, though I'm mostly going to be focusing on the DISC test, like the DISC assessment, because that seems to be the one that most jobs like lean towards and usually the one that like most of them use. And so the DISC assessment is basically like they give you a list of like statements and you have to like rank them from like strongly agree to like strongly disagree. An example, like some of them can be something like I tend to be very organized. So you would either say like, yes, I strongly agree, strongly disagree. And then sometimes there's ones in the middle, like you can be in the middle or you can say yes, or like sort of agree, sort of disagree, things like that. So that's typically how they're structured. In DISC itself, it's an acronym, so it's like stands for dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. Um, and I feel like the use of these tests on the surface, it seems like there's really nothing wrong with them. Like it seems on the surface that there would be a good tool to pick out a candidate, because a lot of like if you like research this, some of the reasoning that like companies use for like why they give out these personality tests as part of the hiring process is they'll say that like, oh well, it helps to like confirm whether or not a candidate will like thrive in a specific work environment. So like they want to see if your personality will actually mesh well with like the work culture. And they also say that like it helps to like weed out like potentially unsuitable candidates, or basically like if they have a list of candidates that they're considering, like these personality tests can help them like isolate the one that would work best. And so like when you think of it like that, it seems like, well, what's wrong with them? Like it's seems like it's good. It helps them narrow down the job, like the candidate pool. It seems like you would be able to find a job that you'd work best at because most people, it's like you want to find a job that you feel like you can fit in, the culture is something that you really like. So it seems like taking this personality test would help you to narrow that down. But the thing is, usually when people are taking a personality test like at home for fun, it's just that, like it's just for fun. And usually people take it just to see like how close it is to how they actually are in real life. I don't think anyone takes a I would hope that most people don't take a personality test and think that like, yeah, this is telling me exactly how I'm supposed to be or like exactly what I should do. Especially things like the Myers-Briggs. Like I know sometimes it'll tell you like at the end, like you would be a perfect like teacher or something. Like I hope nobody's taking this test and using it to like influence their career choices. Because the problem with these tests, and this is really why I want to make this video, is that they're very subtly insidious. And when I say that, what I mean is that again, on the surface, they seem perfect for like their intended purpose. But really, like, there's no science behind it. And that's where it becomes a problem because jobs are using this to, like, pick out people that they want to work, when in reality, these tests are not a good measure of, like, how well someone works, how hard someone works, the skills that they've acquired, how well they work under pressure. Like, these are all things that are best observed, like, in an interview and then, like, in action, like, on the job. You can't really assess how a person is from like a screen and a couple questions that you threw at them. Like that's not really going to let you know what kind of personality somebody has. So I'm also coming at this from an autistic perspective. As an autistic person, I'm coming at this from a different perspective as well, from like maybe the average person, because that's what really made me think about it, is because I have been like applying to just random jobs here and there. And recently I did have to take one of these DISC assessment tests. And I remember sitting there with the questions thinking like how ridiculous some of them were. Like the one part of the assessment that I really didn't like was they had like a list of a bunch of adjectives and they wanted you to like select the ones that best described you. And then on the second part of it, they wanted you to select the adjectives that you think would best fit the job. So it's really like they're trying to get you to like say why you would be a good fit in a very like indirect way, which I mentioned in my direct communication video is something that I don't like. I don't like when people are indirect, and I don't like it in this context as well because it feels seedy and it feels a little shady. So yeah, so a lot of times like the questions are just like nonsensical. I remember one, it was just something like, I tend to look on the bright side of things. And when you look at a question like that, specifically me, like when I'm looking at a job, I'm like, what does this question have to do with me doing my job? And like that's the question like I kept asking myself is like, why would you ask me this? What importance does this have for my job, whether or not I look on the bright side of things or like I'm a positive, like that's really, and then you have to start digging deeper, which I think is where it becomes a problem because it requires people to maybe think in a way that's not natural for them. Because what you have to do then is like when I'm presented with that question of the why, I have to think deeper about like, okay, maybe this question is actually asking, do I tend to have a positive attitude? But you see, wording it like that, like, do you have a positive attitude is very different from do you tend to see on the bright side of things? Like those are very two different lines of thinking for, I would imagine for most people, especially for me, like those are two very different lines of thinking. And like when you say one, but you mean the other, that like is just more time that I have to spend on these questions, like thinking, what is the deeper context of this? Like, what do they actually mean with these questions? So yeah, like a lot of times, like they are not really asking what you think they're asking. And that's why it becomes a problem. Because if you're answering a question that you don't fully understand, your answer might put you at a disadvantage because it's asked in a way on purpose. It's purposely deceitful in that way where it's like asking you something. And when I was researching this, like they say that they do things like that to like measure people's like integrity. So like they know, because let's be real, most people do, they know that people are going to like fudge the answers or kind of lie on these quizzes to try and present themselves as like the best candidate for whatever position they're going for, which is just human nature. That's understandable. Like you want a job, of course you're going to say like your XYZ thing if you feel like that's what the employer is going to be looking for. So the reason that they say they like word these questions in the way that they do is because they want to figure out like how honest the person is being, and they know people are lying. So what they do is they basically try to minimize like the amount of people lying, or like they can very easily pick out the ones who are lying based on how they answer these questions. But again, like I said, as someone who is neurodivergent and someone who's autistic, like that's really messed up in a sense, because I already like, you are assuming that everybody thinks in the same way, which they don't. And then you're assuming that people are going to like answer these questions in a way that like will show if they're deceitful, when in reality they might not understand the question as you're presenting it, which is like intentional, but that's why it's wrong. So yeah, it's just really bad. Like I've read some things that sometimes like people have a tendency to like respond to questions in a way that makes them look good, again, because most people don't want to be seen as bad. If a question's asking you, are you reliable? Of course, most people are going to say yes. No one's going to say, no, I'm unreliable when they're going out for a job. Like that's not something that they're going to ask. And so, yeah, when it comes to like the way that they ask those questions very indirectly and why some people might not understand like exactly what they're being asked because it's intentionally covered in like this veil of like confusion, it causes a lot of bias, obviously, because some people will read a question and interpret it differently than somebody else based on their own life experiences. So you can't really use these tests to judge how someone is or what their personality is like when everybody is coming from a different baseline, which goes back to my point about like these tests are not scientific. There's no baseline for these. Like they don't account for like all the differences in the human condition. Like there's no way they could possibly know how each and every individual is going to respond to a certain question. And so, yeah, it's just like it's ridiculous. You're really like, I know jobs are saying like this is going to help us like secure a candidate, but they're putting themselves at a disadvantage and they're doing a disservice to the people who are looking for jobs because they are being cast out as like unhireable or undesirable when in reality they could be perfectly capable of performing the job to the best of their ability. But because they took a personality test and they're like outside of the norm or the social norm or whatever the heck you want to say, they are not looked at as a potential candidate, and that's wrong. And just some statistics that I thought were pretty interesting that apparently uh, as many as 75% of people who take the Myers-Briggs get different results every time. And I have had this happen to me personally, where I've taken the Myers-Briggs test at different points in my life and I've gotten different results. So that kind of proves that, like, depending on where that person is when they take the test, that's going to skew their results. So yeah, it's very not scientific, because if someone's personality is supposed to be like this immutable, like, same thing throughout their life, then, like, realistically, the results shouldn't change if that's what you're saying. But we can see that, like, since the results change every time, it's highly variable. And it's like, yeah, this is not a good judge of someone's personality if they can take a test 1 month and then take it the next month and it's completely different. And then the issue with these tests as well is that they, like, when jobs do it, they want, again, to, like, bring people together who they think will work well together, work with the company, like, best, support the company values and the workplace environment. But they're also kind of leaving out variety. And I think the problem with that is, if you're hiring a bunch of people that all think and act in a similar manner, like, you're not really going to break any ground. You're not going to do anything different. Like, no one's going to be challenged, which I feel like is kind of, an important part of, like, running a business or a company or any kind of, job, is, like, having people who think differently, collaborating, and, like, maybe you can come up with some new ideas, bounce ideas off of people who don't think the same way as you. And again, I say this, like, as someone who's typically outside of the social norm, and that, like, yeah, it can help to have someone who thinks outside of the box. So these tests kind of unfairly also, like, shun those people who could really be an asset to a company and an asset to a position because of the way that they think, because they are not thinking like everybody else. So yeah, specifically I want to talk about now, like, again, some signs that, like, jobs will look at as being, like, negative, when it's really, like, if someone's neurodivergent, like, these are behaviors that they would exhibit that they might, like, show on these personality tests that, like, will mark them as unhireable, when in actuality, like, that's just something that they can't change. It's how their brain works, and, like, it's not something that can be altered or adjusted. And so really, like, you're excluding people based on something that they can't change. And I think I really want to emphasize that, because when I was researching this topic, a lot of companies said that, like, the reason they use these tests is to, like, get rid of bias, because, like, well, a machine's doing it doesn't know what you look like or anything like that, so it's removing the bias from the equation. Like, human bias is not going to be, like, accounted for, which is really also kind of a lie, because machines can learn. And I actually watched a whole documentary about this. It's on Netflix, called Coded Bias, which goes way more in depth into this than I could possibly cover in a YouTube video. And it's from, people who are experts in the field and can give you, like, very detailed explanations that I can't right now. But in essence, the point of the documentary was to show that, like, yeah, machines can learn. And what it does is, like, based on, like, who the company picks as, like, a candidate, like, they hire on, the computer, like, picks up on, like, what traits are similar, and then they use that in order to kind of, like, push out the people that says, like, okay, well, this company is not hiring people like this. And, like, yeah, maybe the computer can't see that the person is neurodivergent or woman or Black or Asian or what have you, but it's like, that's what's being coded into these programs. And that's what, like, companies don't seem to understand, is, like, a computer can develop bias based on, like, the information that it's given and, like, the reactions of the people who are making the code. Anyway, that's a separate tangent. But I was going to get into, like, the points of, like, why someone who is autistic or neurodivergent might not do well on these personality tests, and it's something that they can't change. So, a lot of times these questions are hard because it's difficult to understand what, like, other people might be thinking or feeling. A lot of these questions are worded in a way where, like, expects you to react to certain situations in, like, a way that, like, normal or average people would, when in reality, like, that's very difficult for you to do. Especially when a lot of these questions, like, they ask them in a way where it's, like, supposed to be, like, black or white, yes or no, but they're very situational. Like, I remember one question on the particular assessment that I had to take not too long ago was something along the lines of, like, would you ask your coworkers about their weekend or something? And, like, me personally, would I do that? No. But it's not because I'm not friendly. It's not because I don't enjoy, like, talking to people. It's not because I'm not, kind-hearted. It's because, like, I don't like small talk. small talk bores me, and it's something that I don't understand. So I'm not going to engage in small talk with my coworkers because that's not something that I feel serves a purpose. But because I know that most people consider small talk to be something that's like good in a healthy work environment, I know that I cannot answer that question with a no or with a disagree, because that's going to be a red flag to whoever is looking at this test, be it person or computer. So that's what I mean. Like, I have to spend extra time on these questions, which is not fair to me because this is just how my brain works. And there's nothing like this is just how I operate. But unfortunately, like, I know that's not going to be deemed as like something that this company wants if I answer the question that way. Another thing is like being very direct and straightforward, which I talked about in my communication video, but basically just being very blunt. And these questions, again, are not very straightforward. They're not very direct, and that can be confusing to people because if I'm reading a question and I'm taking it in a very direct manner, but really it's, not as it's intended to be, then that's going to put me at a disadvantage because I'm answering the question in a way that maybe other people would not answer because they can see the in between the lines, whereas I might not be able to understand that. So yeah, and there's also, this isn't particularly true of me specifically, but I know there are some neurodivergent people, autistic people, who don't understand like sarcasm or metaphors or things like that. And a lot of these questions were like metaphors or things that weren't like, again, very direct, which can confuse someone and make them answer the question in a way that is not accurate. Maybe they don't feel that way. Because a lot of these things, again, they're situational. They're not black and white. People can react differently to different situations. Someone who says that they are organized may be disorganized if, they're stressed out. Like, these are things that you can't understand from a very simple 50-question personality assessment. Like, these are things you're not going to know just from filling out a form. So yeah, I think like most companies really should go back to doing training and hands-on work because that's more indicative of like how someone works. If they're doing training and it's hands-on, you can see if someone's a good fit for the company. Interviews are a great way to like see how someone's personality is. So yeah, I don't think like you're not going to find the right person from a list of adjectives and questions that like most people might not be able to answer or most people lie on. Like, it's just really not a good idea. And I also wanted to touch on one other point. Like I said, I have my notes here. And I also wanted to talk about how these tests could be put people at a disadvantage who might suffer from mental illness or a mental disorder. Because some of the questions were very kind of like, do you often see on the bright side of things? I don't like those questions. Because like one of the issues is that the questionnaires aren't going to know anything about you that you haven't like explicitly said. And so they're making judgments on you like based on a question where it's like you didn't make any like specifics about this question. And like kind of like I said before, like when 75% of people take the Myers-Briggs and they get a different answer, it's because your mood heavily affects how you answer these questions. So for instance, if someone is suffering from depression and you ask a question like, do you often see on the bright side of things? Or like, do you think things that can go wrong will go wrong? Of course, someone who is suffering from depression might agree with those statements. And again, like you can't discriminate against someone for having a mental illness or a mental disorder. And like these tests are given in a way where it's like it makes it easy for them to cast someone off without saying like it's because you had a mental illness, when in reality it's like that really is, if you peel back the tape, that's really what it is. So yeah, like questions like that, like, do you, because that was actually like, that was honestly a question I had, like, do you think that things that can go wrong will go wrong? And I remember sitting there looking at this question like, why is this important for me to do a job? I don't understand what this has to do with me doing my job well, doing my job efficiently. And just this fact that they ask these questions and you're supposed to say like, no, I always see on the bright side of things. Is that human? No, that's not realistic. No one's going to say I always see on the bright side of things always. Or, yeah, one question was also like, do you have a difficult time staying focused if you're in a bad mood? Of course, people are going to lie and say like, no, I can stay focused all the time. When in reality, it's like, yeah, no, something's going on in my life that's very pressing. And it's like, stressing me out, of course it's going to be difficult to do my job maybe at that moment, or maybe I'm not going to be in the best headspace, but it's like that shouldn't be used against someone. Like a very human emotion, like very human reactions to things shouldn't be used against someone. Like we're not like job robots, you know, like we can't ignore the real world and like things that are going on in people's lives. And that shouldn't be used to discriminate against them. It shouldn't be used as a means to like bar them from entry to a company because they might be depressed or they might have anxiety or they might have any other, you know, array of things that going on in their life that might make them answer these questions differently. It's just, it does not make sense and it's not fair. So yeah, sometimes it can be difficult to like change your frame of mind. Like when I can be like deep in depression, like yeah, it's hard to change my frame of mind, like even as much as I want to. It's because like, yeah, that's how my brain is working at that time. It's an imbalance. And like I would love to be happy and positive, but it's hard for me to change that. And again, that shouldn't be used against me in a personality test that like I shouldn't even have to answer in order to get an interview for a job. I want to get this video out there, talk about a subject that I'm not sure if many people are aware of. But yeah, like those personality tests that they use on jobs, they're not great. I wish they would stop using them because it's not standard. They use them here in the West and like in the US specifically a lot. In other countries, that's not the case. They do not use tests like that for jobs. And I feel like that should be across the board because they're useless when it comes to measuring someone's skills. So yeah, that was my little talk for the day, you know, my TED Talk. My little rant, I guess you could say. And I don't know what the next topic is going to be about. I know I said that the next video, meaning this one, would be my like review of Midnight Sun. Truthfully, I've not finished that book because I've just been super busy. I've also been on an Avatar The Last Airbender kick, so like that's been like when I have free time, I've just been really into like the Avatar universe. I haven't even thought about picking up Midnight Sun, but that's not to say I might. That's not to say that I won't maybe review it in the future. Not sure what the next video is going to be, but as usual, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, concerns, you can leave them below, and I will hopefully be able to respond. And so yeah, until next time, thank you guys for watching.